Hello everyone, KTChamberlain here. With the final season of Game of Thrones here, I've been thinking a lot about the book series it's based on by George.R.R. Martin called A Song of Ice and Fire. It's a great title, and it got me thinking of other franchises that have that underlying theme of ice and fire, so much so that I've decided to do a string of videos talking about other franchises that could also be called A Song of Ice and Fire. The great thing about Martin's title is that it's A Song of Ice and Fire, not The Song of Ice and Fire, which would suggest that it's the only one of its kind. And in a sense, you could say that as opposed to a title starting with A. So I decided to call this string of video essays called Another Song of Ice and Fire. And I'll be starting with The Year Without a Santa Claus. Now, hear me out. I know George.R.R. Martin has drawn a lot of influence and inspiration from various sources for his series, from The Wars of the Roses to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams, all of which are very mature and engaging, so it sounds very ridiculous and highly unlikely to imagine him possibly drawing inspiration from a children's Christmas movie made way back in 1974. Be that as it may, I should note one thing. Martin has been nicknamed the American Tolkien because Tolkien was very famous for his world building in his works on Middle-earth. Even so, for all the mature and engaging themes present in Tolkien's works, he did one work in regards to Santa Claus, although he never intended it to be published, and it was published after his death. That work became known as the Father Christmas Letters, or Letters to Father Christmas, depending on the country, in which he wrote letters and drew pictures of funny stories about Santa Claus to his children each Christmas as early as 1920. Having said that, is it too much of a stretch for George.R.R. Martin to have possibly borrowed one small aspect of a movie about Santa Claus and put his own spin on it? Moreover, George.R.R. Martin himself looks like Santa Claus, and in Game of Thrones, Jeor Mormont was played by James Cosmo, who played Santa Claus in the Chronicles of Narnia, and Archmaester Ebrose was played by Jem Broadbent, who also played Santa Claus in Arthur Christmas, and was also in the Chronicles of Narnia too, by the way, as was Peter Dinklage, who played Tyrion Lannister. Make of that what you will, but I've only just begun. For those that haven't seen The Year Without a Santa Claus, the basic summary is that Santa Claus catches sick after Thanksgiving, and is concerned that people no longer believe in him and decides to take a holiday that year, even though he really only works once a year. Two of his elves make their way to Southtown to try and find proof otherwise, but one thing leads to another. The reindeer gets captured after being disguised as a dog, and the only way to get it out of the pound without paying is an approval from the mayor, but the mayor's not convinced that they are elves, but says he'll bail out their reindeer if they can make it snow in Southtown. Mrs. Claus comes to Southtown and takes the elves and a boy they befriended named Iggy to Snow Miser's lair to plead their case. But Snow Miser can't make it snow in the south unless Heat Miser agrees. They go to Heat Miser's lair to plead their case, but he doesn't agree unless they can make a green Christmas in the north. With no other choice, Mrs. Claus pleads her case to their mother, Mother Nature herself, to get the feuding brothers to compromise, and lo and behold, snow in Southtown, and here comes Santa Claus. Now, where I drew this parallel stems from the Miser brothers. Snow Miser and Heat Miser each have a musical number telling us about their characters, even if it is basically cut and paste the same song, with some slightly changed lyrics. Put these two songs together in order as it goes in the movie, it's quite literally a song of ice and fire. In George.R.R. Martin's world of ice and fire, there are two opposing forces that represent the extremes of ice and fire. The others, aka the White Walkers, and R'hllor, the Lord of Light. The White Walkers are what can be basically described as the living dead, and they're supposedly the real threat to Westeros. They're described as being gaunt with skin as pale as milk and have eyes with a blue that burns like ice. They wield ice crystal weapons that can shatter steel, and those killed by them come back as whites, the Walking Dead animated by ice magic. They even have a music score that brings chills down your spine as though to suggest that death is coming for you. I always consider that theme to be the 4/4-string ostinato in D minor, but on land instead of at sea. They do have two known weaknesses. Dragonglass, also known as obsidian, is one of them, as Samuel Tarly makes that discovery in killing a White Walker. It's also implied in the books that dragon steel is one of their weaknesses, which is another name for Valyrian steel, which is very similar to Damascus steel in our world. And that's why Hardhome in the show has this awesome moment where Jon Snow successfully blocks an ice lance in battle and shatters the White Walker with Longclaw. As for the whites they control, using fire is one of your best options, and if you can make your sword go up in fire like Thoros of Myr or Beric Dondarrion, a best defense is a good offense. White Walkers also bring with them stormy weather. In the books, it's not yet clear who commands the White Walkers, or for that matter, if they even have a leader as such. It might be revealed in Martin's upcoming book, The Winds of Winter, but the show Game of Thrones came up with the Night King, not to be confused with the Night's King, who was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch that went rogue. Snow Miser says in his song, "Whatever I touch turns to snow in my clutch." The Night King in Game of Thrones has converted 100 of Craster's male babies into White Walkers just by touching them after being offered up like a sacrifice. What does this have to do with anything? Well, it should be noted that all bastards in the North are not given the surname of their biological fathers. They are given the surname Snow. In other regions of Westeros, it varies from sand, stone, storm, waters, you get the idea. While none of Craster's daughters like Gilly, or for that matter, any bastard wildlings are given the surname Snow, they might as well since they're in what they call the North, the real North. Snow Miser has minions that look like him, only smaller. What if they were humans that he made physical contact with and turned them into snow bastards like Craster's sons? To the casual viewer, you would think they were his offspring or something of the kind. Granted, we never see him make any physical contact with a child like Iggy, but the funny thing about snow is that it can be molded, it can be sculpted, it can be made into any shape like a snowman. That being said, who's to say that he didn't change his minions' faces to look like his, after being converted to avoid suspicion from someone like Mrs. Claus or Mother Nature? If this theory's true, then he really is
too much. Too much!
Now, on the other side of the fence, we have the Lord of Light named R'hllor in the books. The religion that centers on him is based mostly on Zoroastrianism, which is deceptively hard to say. Like the others, very little is known about R'hllor, especially since he's an unseen character. Hell, it's not even 100% clear if he even does exist in the books or the show, yet both the books and the show really do make you wonder. Red preachers like Melisandre and Thoros of Myr preach a lot about R'hllor, the fire he embodies, they see visions in the fire, and some have even revived the dead through fire magic. Hell, Thoros revived Beric Dondarrion roughly 6 times.
6 times? God, that's gotta hurt.
And in the books, Beric revived Catelyn Stark after she was killed at the Red Wedding, but at the cost of his life. However, she became less of herself and adopted the moniker Lady Stoneheart. You'd have to be really villainous to call yourself Stoneheart to begin with. Each time Beric has been revived, he becomes less and less whole of himself. Regardless, there have been some people theorizing that the followers of R'hllor are the real bad guys, since they see everything in black and white as opposed to the others who have not been warring, unlike the humans south of the Wall and beyond. In The Year Without a Santa Claus, Heat Miser looks a lot like a bad guy as opposed to Snow Miser. He looks like a devilish clown, literally packing heat. Not that kind of heat, mind you, but you get the idea. If the movie wasn't kid-friendly, I imagine Heat Miser would have agreed to snow in Southtown if Mrs. Claus sacrificed Iggy to him. That's exactly what the followers of R'hllor would do if given the opportunity. One last thing I want to mention about the parallels The Year Without a Santa Claus has with A Song of Ice and Fire, or in this case, the HBO series Game of Thrones, is that both have subplots that are very convoluted, if not pointless. Bear with me. In the 7th season of Game of Thrones, Tyrion, of all people, proposes the idea of going beyond the wall to capture a white and present it to Cersei to convince her to a ceasefire for Westeros to band together to fight the army of the dead. They do this, but Cersei secretly goes back on her word, proving that the goal of the journey was entirely pointless. Gee, who should have seen that coming, Tyrion? In The Year Without a Santa Claus, the mayor agrees to free Vixen from the dog pound if Jingle and Jangle can somehow make it snow in Southtown. As a bonus, he'll give Santa a day off from Christmas this year and convince all the other mayors in the US to do the same. Whilst Jingle, Jangle, and Iggy accompany Mrs. Claus to try and achieve that goal with the Miser brothers, Santa Claus rides in on a reindeer and frees Vixen from the pound himself. So basically that part of their mission to have the mayor do it for them was entirely pointless. But what about Santa's day off? Well, Santa does get his day off from Christmas this year, but after seeing a child's letter saying she'll have a blue Christmas without him, giving rise to the song Blue Christmas, he decides to rescind the day off, making that entirely pointless, and in turn, proving that the title's a lie. It's an even bigger lie than Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which, the more you think about it, should have been titled Did the Grinch Steal Christmas? There was no year without a Santa Claus in this movie because Santa got with the program and did his job, which is only once a year.
That was your job. Your only job.
And that was another Song of Ice and Fire. I hope you enjoyed this weird little video essay that may or may not have made your childhood more significant. Join me next time when I do another Song of Ice and Fire. This is KTChamberlain. Thank you for watching.